Friends, we can all see that many white bloggers have millions of followers. Please support me too, because my followers are still few. Black bloggers also deserve to be famous. My friends, let's unite and lift each other up. Please press subscribe button and like. On a bustling Friday night in downtown Atlanta, two black twin sisters, Danielle and Dominique Carter, found themselves at a local bar, seeking a brief escape from their demanding lives as FBI agents. The atmosphere was lively, filled with laughter and music, but the night took a dark turn when they were confronted by a trio of off-duty police officers, Sergeant Rick Dalton, Officer Mark Stevens, and Officer Kyle Boyd, who were clearly intoxicated and eager to assert their authority. "Back off," Danielle warned, her voice steady as she faced Rick, whose bloodshot eyes glinted with arrogance. He leaned closer, the stench of whiskey on his breath. "Or what, sweetheart? You gonna make me?" His massive frame loomed over their table, casting a shadow that felt suffocating. Dominique, seated beside her sister, remained calm, her fingers tightening around her drink. She glanced at Luis, the bartender, who was nervously wiping the same spot on the bar, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating situation. "We're just being friendly," Mark sneered, positioning himself behind Dominique, his hands resting on her chair. "Friendly?" Dominique replied, her voice cold. "This isn't friendly." The tension in the air thickened, and the other patrons shifted uncomfortably, some glancing toward the exit, sensing the brewing storm. "Last warning," Danielle said, her dark eyes unwavering. "Walk away while you still can." But Rick only laughed, dragging a chair closer and straddling it, his smirk widening. Ladies seem to have forgotten whose town this is. As the officers continued their harassment, the sisters exchanged a silent glance, a lifetime of unspoken communication passing between them. They had faced tougher battles than this, but the stakes felt different tonight. The officers were not just drunk, they were predators, and the sisters were their prey. "Here's what's going to happen," Rick said, his tone shifting from playful to menacing. "You're going to apologize for your attitude, buy us a round of drinks, and maybe we'll forget this little display of disrespect." Danielle took a slow sip of her drink, setting it down deliberately. "Here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to take your hands off my sister, step back from our table, and leave us alone, because right now you're making a very big mistake." Rick's eyes narrowed, and he leaned closer, dropping all pretense of humor. "That sounded like a threat." "Sure it did." Kyle chimed in eagerly, his drunken bravado on full display, definitely threatening an officer. The sisters exchanged another look, their training kicking in. They had been in dangerous situations before, but this felt personal. The officers moved in closer, forming a tight circle around their table, their intentions clear. "Would you look at that?" Rick drawled, his eyes roving over their bodies. Twins really do share everything. "Back off," Danielle warned again, her voice rising above the music. "You're drunk, and you're making fools of yourselves." But Rick only laughed, his confidence bolstered by the presence of his fellow officers. "Making fools of ourselves? You come in here dressed like that, and we're the fools?" Dominique's face hardened. "Our clothes are an invitation, and your badge isn't a license to harass women." Rick's laughter was cruel. "Honey, if you didn't want attention, you wouldn't dress like this." The situation escalated quickly. Rick's hand shot out, connecting with Dominique's backside, a move that echoed through the bar like a gunshot. The sisters sprang into action, their training kicking in as they fought back against the officers' advances, eyeing the chaos. The sisters managed to break free, using their agility and combat training to their advantage. They fought with precision, each movement calculated and deliberate. The officers, caught off guard by the sisters' unexpected resistance, struggled to regain control. "Get them!" Rick shouted, but it was too late. The sisters had already turned the tide, using their surroundings to their advantage. They fought back with ferocity that surprised even themselves, fueled by years of pent-up frustration and anger at the systemic injustices they had witnessed. As the fight raged on, the bar's patrons began to take notice, some pulling out their phones to record the unfolding drama. The sisters' determination was palpable, and the officers' bravado began to crumble under the weight of their own arrogance. Finally, with a swift kick, Danielle sent Rick sprawling to the ground, his weapon clattering away from him. "You think you could just bully us?" she shouted, her voice ringing with defiance. "You're nothing without your badge." With Rick incapacitated, the sisters turned their attention to Mark and Kyle, who were now on the defensive. The bar erupted into cheers as the patrons rallied behind the sisters, emboldened by their bravery. "Call the police!" someone shouted, but the sisters knew they couldn't rely on the very system that had failed them time and time again. Instead, they fought on, determined to expose corruption that had plagued their community for far too long. As they continued to battle the officers, the sisters felt a surge of adrenaline. Each punch and kick was not just a fight for their own dignity, but a stand against the systemic oppression they had faced throughout their lives. They were no longer just two women in a bar. They were warriors fighting for justice. In the midst of the chaos, Danielle caught a glimpse of Luis, the bartender, who had been watching in horror. He quickly grabbed his phone, realizing the importance of documenting the incident. "I'm recording this," he shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. "Everyone needs to see what's happening." The fight reached a fever pitch as the sisters worked in perfect sync, their movements fluid and practiced. They had trained for years, honing their skills as FBI agents. But this was different. This was personal. This was about reclaiming their power. As the officers struggled to regain control, the sisters managed to subdue Mark, pinning him against the bar. "You think you can intimidate us?" Dominique spat, her eyes blazing with fury. "We're not afraid of you." Just as they were about to take down Kyle, the sound of sirens pierced the air, growing louder as they approached. The sisters exchanged a glance, knowing they had to act fast. They couldn't let the officers escape or twist the narrative in their favor. "Let's finish this," Danielle shouted, and with one final push, they took down Kyle, leaving all three officers incapacitated on the floor. The bar erupted into applause, and the sisters stood tall, bruised but unbroken. "Welcome to our world," Dominique said coldly, looking down at Rick, who was now at their mercy. "How does it feel to be helpless?" With the officers captured, the sisters knew they had to act quickly. They retrieved their phones and began recording, documenting the entire incident for the world to see. They would not let this moment slip away. They would ensure that justice was served. As they left the bar, the sisters felt a sense of empowerment wash over them. They had faced down their oppressors and emerged victorious. But they knew this was just the beginning. The fight for justice was far from over, and they were ready to take on the system that had tried to silence them. In the days that followed, the sisters worked tirelessly to gather evidence, reaching out to witnesses and gathering testimonies from those who had suffered at the hands of corrupt officers. They knew they had to build a case that would expose the truth and hold those responsible accountable. As the investigation unfolded, the sisters found allies in unexpected places. Community members who had once been afraid to speak out began to share their stories, emboldened by the sisters' bravery. Together, they formed a coalition dedicated to dismantling the corrupt system that had oppressed them for far too long. The sisters' story spread like wildfire, capturing the attention of local and national media. They became symbols of resistance, inspiring others to stand up against injustice and demand change. The hashtag Carter Sisters became a rallying cry for those seeking justice, and the sisters found themselves at the forefront of a movement that sought to reclaim their community. As the trial approached, the sisters stood united, ready to face their oppressors in court. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they were determined to see it through. They had fought for their dignity, their rights, and the rights of others, and they would not back down now. But just as they were preparing for the trial, a shocking twist unfolded. They received an anonymous tip that the officers were planning to retaliate, to silence them before they could testify. The sisters knew they had to act fast, but they also understood the risks involved. "Whatever happens, we stick together," Danielle said, her voice firm. "We can't let them intimidate us. We have to be ready for anything." Dominique nodded, her expression resolute. "We've come too far to back down now. We'll expose them no matter the cost." As the sisters strategized their next move, they felt the weight of their mission pressing down on them. They were not just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for every person who had ever been silenced, every victim of corruption who had been denied justice. The night before the trial, they received a chilling message. "You think you can take us down? You have no idea what you're up against." The sisters exchanged worried glances, knowing that the stakes had never been higher. They had to be prepared for whatever was coming their way. As they prepared to face their oppressors in court, they steeled themselves for the battle ahead, ready to confront the darkness that had plagued their community for far too long. But little did they know, the true fight for justice was only just beginning, and the shadows of corruption ran deeper than they could have ever imagined. And just as they were about to step into the courtroom, a figure emerged in the shadows, a familiar face that would change everything. Danielle Dominique, the figure said, their voice low and urgent. "We need to talk. There's something you need to know." The sisters turned, their hearts racing as they prepared to face whatever revelations awaited them. The fight for justice was far from over, and the truth was about to be unveiled in ways they could never have anticipated. Do you want to know the fate of the heroes? Please post part 2. Subscribe to the channel and continue watching. Your opinion and support are important to me. Leave it in the comments. Thank you.